Today I found a lucky flower. I think that's a good sign. Another family is coming this week to choose one of us. And this time, maybe, just maybe, they will choose me. I went to get my flowers some water today. On my way back, I tripped and fell. But soon I'll have a family. And then there will always be someone to catch me. Soon. Today is the day. The family is coming to choose. I hope I look pretty enough. Do you believe in happy endings? I do. I want to. Today, a family came to the orphanage. They came to choose one of us, to take one of us home, to be safe and happy. Today, after waiting and hoping for so long, there was a happy ending. But it wasn't mine. And I'm not sure I can hope anymore.
I want to say a couple of words about the video that you just watched. It was actually done by my son Alan a number of years ago as a senior project as he was finishing up his degree program at the University of Cincinnati. And he wanted to tell the story of the millions of orphans around the world that are waiting for their forever families. The story is a simplification of what really happens, but it does represent accurately what millions of children around the world face every day. It was narrated by my daughter Carlin, who was one of the last kids to come out of Romania before they closed their doors to international adoption. And we find it both poignant and moving whenever we watch it because of the reality that is represented by that video. Right now, I'm going to have some of my kids and even a couple of my grandkids come up and do a song for you. And every one of these kids is a former orphan, one who did have that happy ending that the little girl in the video was still waiting for. And then after that, I'll come up and do some more talking.
place to know that I belong, a home prepared for me. Could I be dreaming? Is that a hand reaching out for me? Is this the light? Show me the light of your love, a home that is waiting, sent from above. Your heart touches mine, in a place that is new. Oh, show me the light that is you.
Lord, I see the light that has overcome my loneliness. A love I feel so deeply in my mom and daddy's arms. To be chosen is a gift that I feel way down inside of me. Lord, I see the light. Oh,
Show me the light of your love, a home that is waiting, sent from above. Your heart touches mine, in a place that is new. Oh, show me the light that is you. Arms that will carry me more than my own, straight to the Father who made us a home. A home. Oh, show me the light of your love, a home that is waiting, sent from above. Your heart touches mine, in a place that is new. Oh, show me the light
Well, good evening. I want to begin by saying thank you for having us here tonight. It is our very great pleasure to be here, all the way down from Cincinnati. We had quite an adventure getting down here, but I won't bore you with the details tonight. If the kids seem a little bit tired, it's because it's been a long, hard trip so far. But we are very excited to be here. Excited to be in Christy and Patrick's church, their home church, and also Dean and Linda's self. I won't give you the full story, but when we adopted our second child from Bolivia back in 2000, Dean and Linda were missionaries there in La Paz, the La Paz area, and saved our lives a number of times during the course of that difficult adoption. My wife, Kathy, and I have been married 38 years. We have 22 children, 4 biological and 18 adopted. And truthfully, our life is very different than what we imagined when we started out 38 years ago. We did very early on talk about adopting, but 1 or 2 cute little kids from Korea or something like that is what we dreamed about back in those days. Never imagined that it would become what it did. But as a sort of a natural outgrowth of our own adoption stories, we felt led by God, even called, at about the time we were working on Colin's adoption from Bolivia, to do more than we could do just by adopting kids ourselves. We knew that there was a finite limit to how many we could bring home, and that the need around the world was tremendous. So we felt led to found a ministry And in particular, we felt called to minister to the kids that had more strikes against them, the kids that found it more difficult to be adopted, kids that had special needs, medical, emotional, whatever, kids who were part of a sibling group, or kids who were older than about 2. All of those kids have a more difficult time being placed. To date, our ministry has been a part of bringing home roughly 350 kids. So, see, we're not doing it all just ourselves. And there are a number of other ministries or sub-ministries that we have been privileged to be a part of along the way. We have been part of sending a medical team to China 7 different times to perform neurosurgery on kids over there that couldn't get it otherwise. We sent a team of physical and occupational therapists to Romania to provide services that the kids there desperately needed and couldn't find. We help with foster care for kids in other countries. So from our original mission of just trying to get the word out and find families for kids waiting to be adopted, we have expanded into more areas of orphan care, because not all kids who are orphans are able to be adopted, either because they're not eligible or because there aren't enough families coming forward to adopt them. So there are a lot of areas of orphan care that don't directly involve adoption. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I want to begin, after that lengthy non-beginning, with a scripture passage from the book of John. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Seems a strange passage to quote when I'm up here talking about adoption. But the central idea in this passage is summarized in the words, that the works of God might be displayed in him. The Bible, in fact, has as one of its central themes the sovereignty of God. The man mentioned in John's Gospel, in the passage that I just read, had lived into adulthood in darkness, in blindness. Kathy and I have a child who is now a teenager. You saw him up here singing just a minute ago, who is blind. And so we know something of what it is to live as a blind person in this world, and I'm sure that it was considerably more difficult 2,000 years ago. So the suggestion in this passage that I read is that God ordained this man's blindness simply so that at some point in his life, a carpenter from Nazareth, styled as a rabbi, would walk by and challenge him to believe and obey, and thereby transform his reality, just so the glory of God could be displayed. We tend to think of things like blindness and disability and disease as curses, but the Bible commonly characterizes them as opportunities for the display of God's glory. Consider the book of Job, which more than anything else is a parable of the sovereignty of God. Job is stricken with deep personal loss, disease, and misery, all at the hand of God, albeit through the agency of Satan. In the end, God reveals himself to Job as supreme, not susceptible to challenge or insubordination, and perfectly justified in doing whatever he wants, whenever and however he wants. And the amazing thing is that Job's reaction when facing the majesty of this divine tyrant was to worship. But that's another story. I could talk about that at length, but I'm not going to. One of the things we struggle with as believers is surrendering our own ideas of what is good, what is fair, what is right, to the utter and comprehensive sovereignty of God, whose ways are beyond knowing, and whose love and kindness and tenderness with his children is beyond our imagining. We've seen many, many examples of what Rich Mullins calls the reckless, raging fury that we call the love of God in our own stories. And in fact, Kathy is going to come relate one of those stories now.
There's nothing that comes to pass, but God has his purpose in it. Though the world seems to run at random in blind confusion and rude disorder, yet God governs it to make perfect harmony out of all the seeming discords. That was written in the 17th century by a Puritan named Ezekiel Hopkins. Excuse me. Sometimes it does seem like the world is running at random, like maybe God has fallen asleep and forgotten about us, let things slip a little bit. There's so many times in the world of adoption when God brings us into situations full of mystery and confusion as he teaches us to trust him, and he gives us opportunities to watch him wow us with his perfectly orchestrated plans. Sometimes he'll let us look back and see what his reasons were for what appeared to us to be shifts and surprises in the story. Other times we don't ever know what was going on. But he wants us to learn to trust him even when he chooses not to enlighten us. In March of 2001, the director of one of the agencies that the Shepherd's Crook works with went to China, and while he was there, he met a little boy, beautiful little boy. He sent us a picture of this little boy. His name was Lu Chen. As you can see from this picture, he was born with a very severe cleft lip and palate. He was about 6 weeks old when this picture was taken, and desperately needed medical care and a family. So we put him on the Shepherd's Crook website, and we started trying to find a family for him, and weeks passed. Nobody came forward. Nobody expressed any interest in adopting him. We started talking about the possibility of adopting him ourselves, but it was a really terrible time for us to consider an adoption. Just a few months before this, in October, Scott and I had gone to China to adopt our daughter Robin, who was 2 years old at that time. We came home with Robin, and we spent 5 days unpacking our bags and repacking our bags, and then boarded a plane with our entire family, which consisted of 7 children at that time, and flew to La Paz, Bolivia, to adopt Colin, who was also 2 years old. That's when we were there with Dean and Linda. We got home with Colin just before Christmas. We got through the holidays and started settling in 2 new 2-year-olds into our family. In January, we were hit with a slew of medical issues. Some of them required out-of-state surgeries for the kids. In February, we learned about our daughter Carlin, who was waiting in Romania. She was 3 months old and had spina bifida and needed to get out. Romanian adoptions, as Scott mentioned, were closing. So we were fighting like crazy to raise the funds and try to get her out of there. We had no idea at the time that that would take 2 years, but that's a different story. But so all of those things were going on, and it was a terrible time for us to think about adopting. But I had already fallen in love with this baby the second I looked at those eyes, and it was really easy for me to say, let's just do this. So Scott and I prayed about it, and by June, there was still no increase about this little baby, and we knew that God was calling us to step out and try to adopt him. We chose the name Aiden Matthew. Excuse me. And we were super excited about this adoption because Chinese adoptions move really smoothly, and we knew he'd be home within 6 months, easily in time to celebrate his first birthday. We were wearing ribbons on our wrists. It's the first time we'd done this with an adoption. We had a white ribbon for Carlin, and we chose red for Aiden and tied those on our wrists. The whole family wore them. It was just kind of a way of keeping our babies close to our heart while we waited for them to come home, reminders to pray for them. And our plan was, when we got them home, to cut the ribbons off and tape them all into their baby book so they could look back someday and see all the ribbons that people wore to love them while we waited on them to come home. November of 2001, it was getting close to time for Aiden to come home. He had grown and changed. We were getting super excited. And suddenly, China began changing their adoption policies. This was a super chaotic time for adoptions in China. And all the kids whose adoptions were in process at that time, including Aiden, were just stuck. There was a lot of question about whether they would be allowed to come out at all because they had been started under the old policy. The agency that was involved in trying to help us adopt him, the same one that had found him, fought really hard to try to get these kids out. He fought so hard for Aiden, and to the point that the Chinese officials were really angry at him that he would dare question their policies and have anything at all to say about this. I mean, who was he, an American, to question what they were doing? So it became clear that Aiden wasn't going to be home in time for his first birthday, and maybe never. Excuse me. By May of 2002, almost a year after we had decided to start Aiden's adoption, things kind of settled down, and it suddenly looked like maybe he was going to be coming home after all. We had already had his crib set up for many weeks. His clothes were hanging in his closet. His teddy bear was waiting in his bed. So we were really excited. It looked like maybe it was finally going to happen. On the last day of June, Scott and I were out on a date. We were in a local bookstore browsing around, and his phone rang. We looked at the phone, and it was our agency's phone number. So we dashed outside so we could talk. And on the other end of the line was Cheryl, who was our contact at the agency. And she said to us, China has finally sent you a referral letter, and it's for a little boy, but it's not for your little boy. The officials in China had unofficially stated that because this agency had dared to defy them, that Aiden would never be allowed to come out of China. Instead, they had assigned us a little boy that we had never met before, never heard of before. His name was Wu Hai Ha. He was 2 years old. He was also born with a cleft lip and palate, although his lip had been repaired in China. He was living with a foster family there in China. And he also needed a family. They couldn't adopt him, and he needed to get out. They told us this referral letter would be forwarded to us via overnight delivery, and as soon as we received it, we had to mark the box beside either we accept the adoptee mentioned above, or we cannot accept the adoptee mentioned above, and had to send it back to them right away. Even in our shock, Scott and I knew that we could never say no to a child that had been assigned to us. So we marked the box beside the words, "We accept the adoptee mentioned above," and we returned the letter. Over the next couple of days, we went through just a multitude of emotions. On July 2nd, 2002, we wrote an email to the many people who had been praying for us through this whole story. This is an excerpt of that email. The first couple of days after we heard this news, we fluctuated between feelings of anger, numbness, intense sadness, and peace. On Sunday, we were granted much peace, although the deep sadness has remained. It occurred to us that we need to deal with what we do know for sure. And we know now that we have a son in China that needs to come home. And we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and get busy getting our baby out of China and into our family. We cannot understand God's ways, so we have to trust Him to handle the things we don't understand. We made a commitment that this would be God's ministry and that we would allow Him to choose for us which children are ours. Now we have to examine whether we truly believe these words. On Sunday, we gathered our children in the family room for a solemn ceremony to say goodbye to our dearly loved Aiden Matthew. Those who wished to do so wrote letters to a baby brother who would never receive them. We cut the red ribbons from our arms. We took turns hugging Aiden's teddy bear, which had been waiting in his crib for months, and then we packed all of these things lovingly into a box to keep. We talked about our heartbreak, we prayed together, and we cried. After a while, we brushed away our tears and began preparing to receive this new gift God had surprised us with. We've chosen the name Stephen Isaiah for him because of Isaiah 15:24. Surely as I have planned, so it will be, and as I have purposed, so it will stand. We know that God has not made any mistakes. This child was always intended to be our son, even though we didn't know anything about him before the agency's phone call. We've chosen purple for Stephen's color, have cut new ribbons to wear for the next few weeks as we wait for him to join our family. Scott and I left in August to go to China to meet this new little boy and to bring him home. When we met Stephen, he was crying so hard. It was clear he'd been crying for a long time. His face was all splotchy, and his eyebrows were swollen, and his eyes were all puffy, and he cried through that entire first day. He stood in the hotel room just banging his little fist on the door and screaming, and he wouldn't let either one of us near him. We'd been through some traumatic and difficult transitions before in some of our other adoptions, so this didn't really surprise us or scare us. But it was still really sad not to be able to get close enough to comfort him or to calm his fears. Finally, after hours of this, late in the day, his crying stopped. By that evening, he was allowing Scott to get close to him, even started giving him some smiles, played a little bit of peekaboo with him, but still, he wouldn't let me anywhere near him, and this went on for days. I understood all the reasons that it was hard for Stephen to accept me in the place of the foster mom that he'd attached to, but my heart was still so raw from the loss of Aiden that day after day of Stephen's rejection was just almost more than I could bear. On the fifth day, we got up in our hotel room as normal, got showered, got ready to head down to the lobby for breakfast. We walked out of the hotel room and started down the hallway, and Scott took Stephen's hand, and they walked down in front, and I was walking behind them just to give Stephen the space he needed until he was ready to accept the love that I wanted to give him. Stephen was really happy by this time, as long as Scott was near him and as long as I was not near him. And he would do this little thing we called his kicky dance, where he would just propel himself down the sidewalks of China or down the hallways of the hotel, just kicking his legs out behind him, just out of pure joy. So he was holding Scott's hand and kicky dancing down the hallway toward the elevator, and suddenly he stopped, and he turned around and looked at me, and I saw an instant decision across his face, and he let go of Scott's hand, and he turned around, and he walked back to me and fell in step beside me, and then he just reached his hand up and took my hand. And my heart just soared. I just wanted to held my breath. I just wanted it to last forever. But, that was a dramatic final step for him. At that instant, his grieving ended abruptly and completely. He embraced his new family and his new life with all the might that his little heart possessed. He went through all of his days in China, the rest of the time we were there, just waving and singing and smiling at everybody he saw. There he is doing his kiki dance, actually. When we got him home, Stephen fit in great with the family. He settled in just beautifully. We were so thankful for this bundle of joy that God had just dropped into our laps out of nowhere. Stephen was a beautiful gift, and he was a balm to our hearts that were still breaking over the loss of Aiden. At the end of September, about 6 weeks after we brought Stephen home, we got another phone call from the same adoption agency. In spite of China's official but really angry declaration that Aiden would never be allowed to leave, he was now listed on another agency's website as available for adoption. So we called this other agency immediately, told them the whole story, and begged them to let us go back in and try again. They felt like there wasn't a very good chance of it, but they finally agreed to let us try. So we started the whole battle over again. We started raising the funds. We started all the paperwork. This just dragged on for months as we were up and down emotionally all over the place again. It's a really long story. Part of us was really scared to risk the heartache again, but there was a huge part of us that felt like, oh, we've got this all figured out. Now we know what God was doing. Like, that was just his really cool way to get 2 kids out of China. This is how he led us to Stephen, and now Aiden's going to get to come home. So there was a big part of us that felt really sure about that, like we knew exactly what God was going to do. This was going to be such a cool story, and we couldn't wait to stand up in front of groups like this and share this amazing story. Like I said, it's a long story. It goes on and on, up and down. The highs are really high and the lows are really low. But finally, in January of 2003, right after Aiden turned 2, we got word from China that it was over, that we would never be allowed to adopt him, and that we'd better not ever ask again. We were never given a reason for our denial, but everyone involved knew that it was because our name was associated with this agency who had dared to go in and fight for him and try to get him out. This is an excerpt from another email that we sent out after getting this news. We've cried buckets of tears, and we've been whining to God that to lose Aiden once was unbearable. How can he expect us to face the grief of losing him again? We've been constantly reminded of the story in Daniel 3 when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are about to be thrown into the furnace. In verses 17 and 18, they say, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Our long battle for Aiden is over. Right now, the thought that Aiden is finally free to leave China, but that we will not be allowed to have him after fighting for him for 19 months is causing us almost overwhelming and paralyzing sadness. But our prayer is that since God's answer to our request to make Aiden our son is no, he will give us the strength to state emphatically that we will continue to serve him with all of our hearts, even if we can't understand his reasons for leading us through the same dark valley twice. We knew the agency would be returning his file. Once we had been denied the request to adopt him, they would return his file to Beijing, and once this happened, Aiden's name would be essentially thrown into a pot where maybe someday it would be pulled out again and placed on another agency's list, or maybe it would never be pulled out again. So we knew that if that file was returned, there was a very good chance that that would mark the end of any hope of him ever leaving China. So we begged them to give us just 2 weeks before returning the file so we could try to find a family for him, even though we had had no luck finding a family for him before that. No matter how much we had him on our website, we didn't have anybody come forward. So we wrote an email telling Aiden's story, and we passed this email on, and it was shared and passed around the whole country until finally it landed into the hands of a family in Virginia. This family had never even considered adoption until they heard Aiden's story. About a year later, Lu Chen, whose lip was repaired in China before he came home, and whose new name would be Nathan, finally came home to his family at the age of 3.5. Our little Aiden's story didn't have the amazing aha ending that we had hoped that it would have. God has never revealed to us his reasons for asking us so clearly to fully give our hearts to a child that he never meant to be ours, or his reasons for taking us along such a winding and confusing path to lead us to Stephen, the son that he did intend for us all along. We thank him every day for Stephen and all that he's brought into our lives, and we're really thankful that Aiden finally got a family. But in our hearts, both boys were our sons, and losing Aiden was really, really hard. So what's the point of this story? We have many other personal adoption stories that have much happier endings than this one, with blow-you-away miracles right at the last minute. And we love to share those too, so why am I sharing this one tonight? Scripture teaches that joy indescribable lies on the other side of total surrender of our lives and our plans to the master plan that God has for us. He wants us to lean hard into him, and he wants us to hear him when he whispers to us, I've got this. Just keep obeying me and trusting me to make something wonderful out of what looks to you to be a total mess right now, even if you never see on this side of heaven what I'm doing. One of my favorite preachers from the 19th century is J.R. Miller, and he has this to say about the subject. No hard lesson which he teaches ever destroys our peace if we receive it with a willing, teachable spirit and strive to learn it just as he has written it out for us. If we receive the lessons in the way that our Master gives them to us, we shall make our life into beautiful music, and we shall find peace. In ways that are hard to explain, this story, full of pain, is such a powerful reminder of how much God loves us and that we can trust him. It's such a comfort to know that he will guide our footsteps. He knows which children are ours, and if he calls us to adopt, he's going to bring together the families and the children that he intends for each other, that he's planned for each other all along. His purposes will come to pass no matter what. He only asks us to empty ourselves, to obey him, to trust him to work out the details even when that involves him needing him to carry us through the dark and confusing places. God is about saving orphans. There's no question about this. It's very clear all through his word that we are all called to step up and to lay our lives at his feet and to be willing to follow him into battle as warriors for these lost children. And he will save many of them through our obedience to that call. But make no mistake about this. He will also save us through this obedience. He will reveal more of himself to us, teach us more about his compassion, his power, his omnipotence, his sovereignty. He'll make us better people. He'll make us better followers of Christ. Through our battle on behalf of the fatherless and through the pain that comes into our lives with his kiss of approval, he will heal broken places inside of our own hearts and lives, as well as in those of the children who are saved. Now the kids are going to sing another song for you, 3 of them. Whenever Scott and I bring a new child home, we always choose a song to be that child's special song. Our newest little one is Nolan. Nolan was originally adopted from the Democratic Republic of China in December of 2012. What's wrong? Where was I? 2012. He just came home to us just this past August. August the 1st, he came to our family. The song the kids are going to sing today is Nolan's song. The lyrics in the chorus are, you don't have to work so hard, you can rest easy. You don't have to prove yourself, you're already mine. You don't have to hide your heart, I already love you. I hold it in mind so you can rest easy. Nolan has heard this song sung over and over again during his 2.5 months home with us. All the kids have been learning it and practicing it to get ready for this trip. We're already seeing amazing healing and an increasing number of little tiny buds of trust beginning to form in his heart. He is daring to hope now that maybe these words can be true for him. His joy increases every day. Still, there are lots of days of exhausting regression, but he has to know, no matter what, he's ours forever and that we'll never stop loving him. The world is full of children whose hearts are bleeding to hear this same message through words and actions and never-ending commitment of parents who will step forward and agree to make them their sons and daughters, give them their names, love them unconditionally and forever. But we're also children of our Creator, and we're longing to hear these same words from a Savior who gave his life to redeem us. The writer of this song, Andrew Peterson, said this about the lyrics. That song is kind of my exhortation to myself and whoever else out there might be struggling to believe that God can both completely love them and completely know them. We hope this song will be an encouragement to your heart. We also hope that it will be an ember that will grow into a blazing fire that will move you to step out and do something to save another child. So this is Rest Easy. Stephen on the end, you heard his story. He's probably not going to kiki dance for you today. Stephen is now 15. This is Megan. She is our oldest adopted child. She's 19. She was adopted from China when she was almost 4. And this is Colin. You've heard us mention him several times, adopted from Bolivia when he was 2. Colin was born in Bolivia, the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, at 26 weeks gestation. Miraculously survived in a country where there was almost no medical care for him. But as a result of that premature birth, he did lose his sight. He was completely blind by the time he was 8 months old, except for a little bit of light perception. When we adopted him, he was in the process of being moved from the orphanage to a mental institution just because he was blind. If we hadn't gotten there when we did, he would have been moved and the world would never have heard his voice. Nobody would ever have known the talent hiding inside of him. So we thank God every day for that.
You are not alone. Oh, I will always be with you, even to the end. You don't have to work so hard, you can rest easy. You don't have to prove yourself, you're already mine. You don't have to hide your heart, I already love you, I hold it in mine. You can rest easy. You can rest easy. Do not be afraid. Oh, nothing in the world can come between us now. You don't have to work so hard, you can rest easy. You don't have to prove yourself, you're already mine. You don't have to hide your heart, I already love you, I hold it in mine. You can rest easy. You can rest easy. You work so hard to wear yourself down. And you're running like a rodeo clown. You're smiling like you're scared to death. You're out of faith and all out of breath. You're so afraid you've got nowhere left to go. You are not alone. Oh, I will always be with you. You don't have to work so hard, you can rest easy. You don't have to prove yourself, you're already mine. You don't have to hide your heart, I already love you, I hold it in mine. You can rest easy.
You're already mine.
You can rest easy.
You're already mine.
You can rest easy.
You're already mine.
Okay, so we've talked about lots of stuff here tonight. Let me recap a few of the key points for you. We talked about God's sovereignty and his provision. We talked about his goodness and mercy, and the need for orphans to have a permanent, loving family to be a part of. And I want to introduce one additional point. Adoption is hard. Let me say that again, just in case you missed it. Adoption is hard. In a talk delivered this year at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in Nashville, Dr. Russell Moore said something along the lines of the following: the evangelical Christian adoption movement needs more men to be involved alongside the women. He said orphan care is not just about nurturing, which we tend to find in the women, and that's why the moms tend to gravitate toward the adoption issue more than the dads do. Orphan care is not just about nurturing. Orphan care is about fighting. He wanted to challenge men, evangelical Christian men, to join the women in this fight, to be warriors, warrior leaders in the spiritual battles over the lives of orphans. So I'm going to close tonight with a challenge to all believers hearing my voice, but especially a challenge to Christian men. I challenge you to ask God if you're involved enough in the fight for the lives of orphans all over the world. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone in this room should go out and adopt a child. I'm not even sure that would be a good thing. But I am suggesting that everyone in this room should go before God and honestly ask if he or she is doing enough in the cause of the orphan. As Kathy mentioned, the Bible is full from front to back with commands and admonitions from God to care for the widow and the orphan. The cause of the orphan needs fighters. It doesn't need more cheerleaders or more well-intentioned observers or more advisors. It needs warriors. Prayer warriors and hold up Moses' arms during the battle warriors, as well as boots on the ground, bring those children home warriors. And echoing the sentiment expressed by Russell Moore, I'll say that the orphan care and adoption movement needs more men. Men who will lead, not follow. This is the admonition of the gospel and the pattern we see there. Now, I'm not suggesting in admonishing men to lead that men are superior to women, whether we're talking about adoption or any other area of Christian ministry. What I am saying is that God has called men to lead. And when men aren't leading, the mission or the ministry suffers because we're defying God's plan for his church. So I'm asking you to pray about this. Pray and see what God has to say to you. Now I want to mention as I close that we have a table set up over here on my right, your left, with information about our ministry and about the orphan care movement worldwide. One of the things we have on that table is a handout that addresses the question of how people who are not called to adopt can help those who are do what they're doing. There are a lot of ways, things that you may not have ever even thought about, not just giving them money, which is always a good thing, but other ways that you can support them as they go through this difficult battle, not just to bring the children home, but once the children are home, to deal with all of the things that come as a result of that. Now, I'm done, and the kids are going to close with one more song. This song echoes some of the challenges that I've presented tonight as I ask you to pray about this. The song contains a message for all believers, not just on the orphan issue, but on the issue of following God in your life. And I believe it is such a profound challenge that we're actually going to show the words while they sing. So listen to them sing, think about the words, and bring it before God in prayer.
Sometimes I just wanna close my eyes and act like everyone's alright when I know they're not. This world needs God, but it's easier to sit and watch. I can say a prayer and just move on like nothing's wrong. I need you, 'cause 'Cause I don't wanna live like I don't care. I don't wanna say another empty barrel. I refuse to sit around and wait for someone else to do what God has told me to do myself. Well, I could choose not to move. I refuse. I can hear the beast of bees crying out so desperately, and I know we are the hands and feet of you, oh God. So if you say move, it's time for me to follow through and do what I was made to do. Show them who you are. 'Cause I don't wanna live like I don't care. I don't wanna say another empty barrel. I refuse to sit around and wait for someone else to do what God has told me to do myself. But I could choose not to move. I refuse.
To stand and watch the weary and the lost cry out for help, I refuse. To turn my back and try and act like all is well.
Stay unchanged, to wait another day, to die to myself. I refuse to make one more excuse. 'Cause I don't wanna live like I don't care. I don't wanna say another empty barrel. I refuse to sit around and wait for someone else to do what God has called me to do myself. Oh, I could choose not to move, but I refuse.